find it useful, hopefully. Okay, so let's see. So storytelling with startups, and so this is basically about stories that startups tell, or actually more realistically, stories that startups should tell. And the first question is, well, why should startups tell stories? And my answer to that is, well, because stories stick, right? They stick in our minds in a way that facts sometimes don't. Stories really do stick. Okay, I'm going to do a little experiment with you. So I want you all to imagine something. So I want you to imagine that you are in the Arctic, the North Pole, and you're looking across the ice, and you can see a polar bear crawling across the ice really slowly, right? Because he is approaching a fat seal, and the seal is sitting on the ice, okay, nice and cozy, nice and comfy, and the polar bear is creeping up behind the seal. And then at the last minute, the polar bear leaps up onto the ice, jumps down, lands on the seal, and bites him. Now, okay, now what could you see in your head when I was describing that? Well, the answer is it was something like this. Now, unless you're an Arctic explorer, you've never been to the Arctic, you've never seen a polar bear attack a seal, right? But you ran a movie, yes, in your head. You've seen David Attenborough, so okay, you ran a little movie about the polar bear in your head because of my words. Well, why is that? Well, there's an interesting thing that goes on inside our brains. When we hear words, we use our kind of rational part of our brain to process the logic. Okay, that's good. But we also use the visual cortex in our brains, the part of our brains that controls what we see, or that registers what we see, also registers what the words mean. And we do it by running a movie based on the words. And so people say to each other, I see what you mean. We literally see what the word, we see the words, we run a little movie. But here's what's even better. When I described the polar bear jumping up and landing on the seal and biting the seal, the part of your brain that controls your arms and legs was actually firing. Your motor neurons were firing in response to those words, because you were imagining, yeah, being the polar bear. When I said the polar bear bites the seal, the muscle, the part of your brain that controls your jaw muscles was firing because you were imagining biting a seal. So not only were you running a movie, you were in the movie, because that's how we process the meaning of words. We run what the scientists call an embodied simulation. So we see it and we feel it. Okay, that's how we process words. That's really interesting. So we see stuff and we feel it, but only if you tell us a story. Why is that? Well, because, okay, stories are full of action and they're full of emotion, full of feeling. And so that's why stories work. That's why we love stories. That's why, you know, when you go to the cinema and you see a film that's been adapted from a book, and you've read the book already, and it's your favorite book, and you go to the movies and you come away thinking, well, you know, it's not as good as I thought it was going to be, because you read the book, you were making your own movie in your head while you were reading the book. And the movie on the screen is never as good as yours, because yours is brilliant. But okay, that's why, because we make a movie play. So when you tell a story, you have to give us action. Something has to happen. You can also give us emotion. It feels like this. And we respond, our brains respond. Yeah. Only then, in stories, can you give us the meaning. Okay, why I'm telling you this is the meaning. Now, what a lot of people in business do when they're talking about their work is they miss the first bit, they miss the second bit, and they expect us to listen to the third bit. So they say, here's why you should work with me. I'm adaptive and hardworking and blah, blah, blah. Okay, they don't tell a story. They just tell the last bit, which is the moral of the story, the meaning. And that doesn't work because, no, I need the other bits. So the action, let's just break this down a bit. So the action means basically stuff happens. So something happens to someone, real person, real place, real time. Yeah, polar bear, doesn't matter. Something happens. What that means is I can see what you mean because I can see the action you're describing. I can see the person doing the thing. Okay, let me give you a little example from a client that I was working with this week. And these guys, they make steel doors. They make steel doors for cruise ships, massive, massive ships, and they make the doors inside the ships. Okay, can you see action? Yes, these are guys, these are engineers, they make cruise ships. They get a call from the client. The client's based out in Japan, and the client says, okay, one of your doors is faulty. It's buckling, like the door looks rubbish. Come and fix it. Okay, so now, have you got a little movie playing in your head? There's some engineers, they've been told that their door, they built a door in a cruise ship, and the door is bent. Okay, can everyone see the movie? Okay, here's the next thing. Emotion. How do you think those engineers felt when they got that call? So how does the client feel, the Japanese client? He's angry. Yes, he's pissed off. If it was you receiving the call, how would you feel? You'd, oh my God, this is terrible. Oh no, this is awful. So there's negative emotion. Yeah, feels bad. Now the emotion is good because it makes a personal connection with the person listening, because we feel a little bit of that emotion too. So here's what happens next. The engineers fly to Japan. On the first flight they can get, it takes them like 24 hours to get there. They fly to Japan. They go into the ship, and they go down the deck, down to the lowest deck, and the client says, right, that door is faulty. And the engineer says, well, hang on a second, that's not our door. We didn't fit that one, that's somebody else's. And the client goes, oh, I'm so sorry. And the engineer says, yeah, we fit the door on the top deck, and that one's working fine. We didn't fit this one. But to tell you what, we'll tell you how to fix it. We'll help you fix it. It's not our door, it's not our problem, but we'll help you to fix it. Okay, so they help them fix the door, the engineers fly home, everybody's happy. So, right, we've got action, yes. You could see the movie. We've got emotion, positive and negative. You feel like you were there. Then, okay, the meaning. What's the moral of your story? Well, the moral of that story is, hey, when you work with us, yes, anything goes wrong, we put it right. You know what, even if it's not our fault, we'll help you, because that's how we work. That's what kind of guys we are. So the moral of your story is where you get the meaning, but you can't give us the meaning without giving us the story. And so with the moral of the story, you're always looking for what's changed and what lessons should we learn from this story. So that's the most basic kind of setup of story. There should be action, you can have emotion, and then you get the meaning of the story. But you don't go straight to the meaning. I'm going to show you an example of someone who does it very badly, who does this kind of storytelling very badly. Now, they're not a startup, but okay. So we all drink coffee, yes, or most of us drink coffee. There's a coffee brand you might have seen, it's Lavazza, have a coffee brand, and their coffee brand is called Tierra. Okay, so Tierra means earth, I suppose, and it's organic and blah, blah, blah. Okay, so it's another coffee brand that's out there. Okay, they have a point of sales, like a sales counter. In a university where I work, there's a point of sale where you buy your coffee, and at the point of sale, okay, there's a counter, and it says, hey, this is the Tierra story. And so I thought, okay, well, I'm here to teach storytelling at this university. Let me have a look. What sort of story is this? And I tell you what, it's an absolutely rubbish story, because it says things like, you can't, okay, Tierra Coffee, our mission is to improve the social and environmental conditions and production techniques of a number of coffee growing communities. Right. Okay, so what's the movie playing in your head right now when you read the words improve the social and environmental conditions and production techniques of a number of coffee growing communities? What can you see? Well, we all might have a vague kind of picture, yeah? But we've all got a different picture, and to be honest, I bet you wouldn't even read that sentence. It's so boring, you wouldn't even bother reading it. You'd just go, yeah, can I have my coffee, please? Right? And then you'd bugger off. You're not going to read that sentence. It's so boring. And there's certainly no movie playing. Right, here's how to do it. Here's how you do it properly. This is Rainforest Alliance. They also make coffee. This is Letitia Monzon. And Letitia is one of 25 million people in the world who depend on coffee for her livelihood. Right. Okay. Let me tell you more about Letitia. Letitia left school at the age of 10 to work on the farm because the family needed the money. Her daughter is going to go to medical school and be a doctor because the Rainforest Alliance, they pay farmers properly. Okay, what's the movie now playing in your head? It's not just Letitia, it's her whole family. Yeah, there's emotion involved. Yeah, okay, that's a story. Because the test, so the test always is, are you telling a story or not? The test is, have you started a movie playing in my head? And if the answer is no, you haven't, then you're not telling a story. And why this matters is, well, we're not very good at remembering facts. In fact, I challenge any of you right now, a little challenge, in the chat or come on the mic, see if you can repeat the sentence that is part of the Lavazza coffee story. Can anyone repeat it? Can anyone remember it? I'm going to take your silence as meaning no, you can't. You can't remember it because it's not a story. It's hard to remember. It's just a collection of facts. It's a collection of facts and opinions. It's very hard to remember. Letitia and her daughter, that's easy to remember. Okay, so that's why story works. We just remember it really well. We remember stories better than we remember facts and opinions. Now, it doesn't mean you can go off telling, like, you can't go making stories up. Your stories have to be full of facts, but you weave the facts into the story. The story is where stuff happens. People care. Yeah, there's a point. So that's why stories are so effective, because we're very, very good at remembering them. And what I'm going to talk to you about now is it's like a couple of things you need to think about in terms of your startup story. And I'm going to start off by focusing on you, the person behind the startup. Why do you need a story about you? Because you do. You need a story about yourself. So, okay, let's go. So the next question is, well, why should startups tell stories? And it's because it's how we see the world, yes, but it's how the world sees you. And that's really important. We see the world as full of stories. We understand the world like it's made of stories. We are a character in the story. And that's how people see you. They want to know what kind of character you are. And you tell them by telling them a story. So here's a little test. Let's see who's awake on the chat. I'm going to ask you a question now, and I need you to reply with A or B. Simple as that. No long answers. Okay, how's the test going? Well, the test is to try and predict what happens to Linda. So our minds exist to predict what will happen next. That's why our brains are so big. And we use stories to work out somebody's character, so we can work out what are they likely to do next. Because if they're acting in character, we know what they're going to do. If they're acting out of character, we better pay attention because they could do anything. So we try to predict what people are going to do next. So here's a woman called Linda. Linda is 31 years old. She's single, outspoken, and very bright. She majored in philosophy. As a student, Linda was deeply concerned with discrimination and social justice. She also participated in anti-nuclear demos. So what I want you to do is to picture in your mind Linda. Imagine a Linda. You know a Linda. Everyone knows a Linda. Okay, and you knew her when she was 21, and then 10 years later, she's 31. You meet her. Okay, what happened after university? What happened next? Option A, Linda now works in a call center. Option B, Linda works in a call center and is an active feminist blogger. So, okay, A or B, guys? Type it in the chat, A or B. B, says John. John's quick off the mark. Julio. Ali, Ben says B. Jessica, I can't remember if I've done this test with you before, but you can answer if you like. Okay, so John and Ben are going with B. Everyone else is holding their cards close to their chest. Jessica's going to go with B as well. Okay. Well, you're all wrong. The answer is A. Here's why. So, Linda's not a story, she's a maths problem. This is a Venn diagram, and the circle around the outside is all adult women in the UK. So there's 25 million adult women in the UK. There's maybe 1 million women working in call centers, right? And maybe there's, I don't know, 50,000 active feminist bloggers. Doesn't really matter. Okay. Oops. The intersection between those two circles are the women who are both working in call centers and active feminist bloggers. The little tiny bit in the middle, yes? The tiny intersection. That's the people who are both. So, okay, if you said B, you're kind of predicting that Linda fits in that tiny, tiny group. Whereas if you say A, well, it's obviously much more likely she's going to be an A. In fact, A includes B. So A is the right answer because it's guaranteed to be correct. She's definitely working in a call center. She might be an active as well, but she's definitely working in a call center. So A represents the correct answer in maths terms. But B's a better story. Yeah? B is a happy ever after, because we don't like the idea that Linda gave up on all her politics and became just a call center worker. We want the idea that she's active still. She's still, sticking it to the man. That's why we go with B, because B is a happy ever after. A is a boring story. But in maths terms, in rational terms, B is the wrong answer. And it is always the wrong answer. A is the right answer. But we don't do maths very well. Even simple maths like this we find a bit hard. Whereas story, we really understand. So the rational world is difficult. The narrative world is very, very easy for us to understand. What's interesting is that you don't need to teach kids how to understand a story. They just love them. From Rasta Mouse through to Jurassic Park, whatever it is, kids just like stories. You don't teach them how a story works, they just get it. You have to teach them how maths works. So there's something interesting there. Story is very easy to understand. This is called the narrative paradigm. And the narrative paradigm is a theory that says people make sense of the world in terms of stories, not facts or logic. Now, you might find that a bit depressing, that people don't really do facts. Well, okay. What I would say to you is, you've got to wrap your facts up in a story. You can't just give people facts. You've got to wrap it up in a story as well. And then people will accept your facts, hopefully. But they can't. You've got to, yeah, facts and logic and science, they're all hard. Story is very, very easy. Okay. Now, when you are putting together a business, you are operating in the rational paradigm. Yes, you're working on a spreadsheet and a business plan, which says, okay, I've got facts here. I've got things, I've got data. I've got a product, I've got a service. I've got, yep. I'm going to use the logic and say, okay, I can help you because I can do this and you can't. You need me, I can do this. This is the price. And in that world, the business world, the rational world, you're making an argument, and you're making the argument as an expert. Okay, all that's fine. You need all that. I'm not saying, I'm not knocking the rational world at all. You need that stuff. But the minute you get into the world of story, right, the minute you gave Linda a face, you're in the narrative paradigm, which is different from the rational paradigm. You're in the world of story. The minute you give somebody a face, that's it. Off we go. There are facts in the narrative world, in the narrative paradigm. They're still facts, but they tend to be facts about things. They tend to be facts about people rather than about things. And it's not data, it's anecdote. Emotions are really important, more important than logic. And what's also important is the values of the character as lived by the character. And your role in business as a startup is to be the right kind of character in your story. So you think, okay, what do I mean by that? Well, let me give you an example, again, from a client I worked with a while ago. So I was working in a university in Ireland, actually, and talking to various professors about their specialism and helping them to tell stories about their work. So I said to you, one woman who was, I'm guessing, late 20s, early 30s, I said, okay, what's your specialism? And she said, okay, I'm an immunologist. I study vaccines. So she's busy right now. She said, I study vaccines. And I said, okay, it's interesting. And then I said, right, I'm going to ask you a personal question. Have you got any kids? And she said, yeah, I've got a little boy who's 3 years old. And I said, okay, I'm going to ask you another personal question. Has he been vaccinated? And she went, oh yeah, absolutely. Okay, so here's my challenge to you. If she'd said, no, I haven't had my own son vaccinated, what would you think of her? Now, in the rational paradigm, she still has all the facts and the data on vaccination. She uses logic, she's an expert, she's making an argument, she's a professor. I don't think you'd believe a word she said, because in the narrative paradigm, she doesn't live up to the values you expect from her character. So she's acting out of character. Therefore, I don't believe that we would take her seriously from that point on. Do you remember in lockdown, there was the guy who was the government advisor who was calling for lockdown, calling for people to stay at home, and then a few weeks later, he was caught breaking lockdown to go and visit his mistress, and he had to resign from the job. Well, again, his expertise hasn't changed, his facts haven't changed, his logic hasn't changed, his argument about lockdown hadn't changed, but he acted out of character. He failed to live up to his own values, and he had to go. He had to quit. So that's how powerful the narrative paradigm really is. He was considered a hypocrite, yes. He wasn't living up to his character. He could still say, look, I still believe, I can still prove that lockdown is the right thing to do, right? That lockdown makes sense, and you could still, the argument is exactly the same, the data is exactly the same, but he can't make that argument anymore. Yeah, he had to go because, to Ben's point, he'd proved himself to be a hypocrite. So character is really important, and character emerges from what you do, not what you say. That's the really important thing to think. What you do that counts, not what you say. Talk is cheap, right? Action counts. So how can this help you when you're talking about your startup? I'm going to skip a slide. Okay, so why should we trust you? That's what we're trying to get to when we're trying to work out whether to do business with you. All right, why should we trust you? Your new business, you're a startup. Why should we trust you? So what you need to do as a startup, as a founder, as the person running a company, you need to tell us a story that shows your character in action. That'll help us to work out whether to trust you. Okay, so I'm going to give you some suggestions. It's easy for me to say, tell a story. I'm going to give you some suggestions that can help you find the kind of story that maybe you need. So let's go. Well, first of all, let's think about, okay, what are your values? So why are you, what motivates you, what drives you? Why are you doing this? Why are you starting your business? Why are you doing the thing that you're doing? Those are your kind of core values. What do you believe in? What do you want to achieve? Also worth thinking about, who do you need to reach with your story? Yeah, who is this story aimed at? Is it aimed at a client? Is it aimed at a funder? Is it a colleague? Okay, always useful to think about your audience. And then you're thinking, okay, what impression do I want to make? What do I want this person to think of me? And often it's, I want them to trust me. That's a good start. So, okay, that's where you start thinking about, okay, what do I believe? What do I think is important to me? Who do I need to impress? What impression do I need to make? Okay, that's a good place to start. Then you move on and think, okay, is there a moment of truth here in my path, my journey to where I've got to so far? When have I hit like a moment of truth? And a moment of truth means, what can mean many things, but it could mean doing the right thing even though it cost you money or cost you time, or cost you reputation. Making a mistake and then admitting it rather than hiding it. When we make mistakes, it's so tempting to hide them, but you make a mistake and you admit, hey, I'm really sorry, I got this wrong. I'll try and put it right. Or maybe there's a time when you could see a shortcut, but you didn't take it because, okay, you stuck at it. Or maybe there's a time when you could have been selfish, but you put others first. Or maybe there's a time when you took a painful decision. Yeah. So I'm going to quit this job. I know I haven't got a job to go to, but I'm going to quit. I'm going to give up my monthly paycheck, and I'm going to quit. Okay. So, for example, with me, 6 years ago tomorrow, no, 6 years, 1st of July, 6 years ago, I gave up a job that I'd had for 23 years, and I quit, and I left an organization where I could have carried on working for the rest of my career. I could have stayed there for another 20 years. I gave up, and it was painful because it was risky, and it was familiar to be there. I could have stayed there in my comfort zone, but I took a painful decision to go. That's a kind of moment of truth. Okay, so now what's the movie? What's the movie playing? What's the moment look like? So what happens? What's the action? What's the emotion? Then what's the meaning? So where's this story taking place? Who's there? What happened? How did it feel? What changed? What did you learn? So I'm going to give you a little movie moment of one of the reasons why I decided to do that painful decision and to quit. And I'd tell it like this. I sat there one afternoon inside the office that I was working in, and in another meeting that was dragging on without really resolving anything. And I looked out the window and the sun was shining and the sky was blue and it was a beautiful day. And I was stuck in that building till 5 or 6 o'clock that day. And the daylight was going to go and the sunshine was going to go. I was thinking, I should be out on my bike. I should be out in the fresh air. I should be out I should be out doing something in this beautiful day. I should be outside. I can't stand it anymore. I can't stand listening to this stupid meeting. I've got to change. That's a little moment for me where I went, okay, I've got to change. I've got to do something. I've got to find a way to not work in this job anymore. So I'd be interested to know, this is what I think you can take away and work on. We can send the PDFs that you've got here to you. You can work on this. Does anyone at the moment, so the guys have been coming on the mic in the chat, so John and Ali in particular, would you want to come on and talk to us about, do you have kind of moment of truth in your journey so far that tells us something about your character? And so would you like to share it with us? Don't worry if you don't, because it's quite okay. Take it away and work on it. Take it away and think about it. Because what you do in these moments, yes, these moments of truth, what you do tells us a lot about you. Remember I told you about engineers who went to a cruise ship in Japan, right? And they went down the decks, and there was a door, and they said, hang on, that's our door. Right? Okay, that was their moment of truth. They could have got really angry and said, you've dragged us all the way out here. Yeah, you've been, like, we could have got really angry. But what they did was, okay, we can help you, yeah? They put something else first. That's the moment of truth. It's got action, yes? It's got emotion. It's got meaning. My character breaks up, Jessica. Okay. Give me a second, guys. I'll switch to a hotspot. Oh, it might be the printer's going off. Is it? Does the internet? Has the reception just started going bad? Sorry, give me a second. Okay, sorry, it might be the wireless printer has just started printing something, so sorry about that. Okay, so the point I was making is there's a moment where you can do the right thing. Sometimes you do the right thing even though it costs you. Yeah, you do the right thing even though it's painful. That's a moment of truth. And it tells us a lot about you, because we can always take the easy way out, right? Do the lazy thing, walk away from the mistake. Okay, those are, yeah. People we want to work with are people who do the right thing. Those are the people we trust. So that's the moment. There's like, okay, there's a story there that, I'm going to give you an example from a startup, from the world of startups. So you know the guys who make innocent smoothies, right? The drinks company. So one of their moment of truth stories is they were making smoothies for their friends. Their friends were saying, God, these are great. These are so good. You should sell these, right? So they went to a music festival and they had a stall, right, where they were selling bottles of smoothie, and they had 2 bins on the stall. Right? One bin said, and above each bin said, like, should we give up our jobs and make smoothies for a living? And one bin said no, and the other bin said yes. And at the end of the festival, the yes bin was full of bottles, and the no bin was almost empty. So they said, right, this is our moment of truth. What are we going to do? And they gave up their jobs to start the company, and the company became Innocent Smoothies. So, okay, that's what I mean by kind of a moment of truth, a moment of decision. And it's a moment that you can tell a story about. And we connect with you through the story. Okay. Any questions about that before we move on? Okay. Thanks, John. Okay, so what I'll talk to you now about is communication. So still talking about story, And communication, well, within a team, but also with you and your network. Your network can be within a team, within an organization, but can also be a kind of, communication within a network of customers, a network of stakeholders, a network of supporters. There's this kind of idea that being like a business leader or a startup leader is this kind of heroic, sort of solo activity. But also, if you think about it across any organization or any network, most of the information is in the network. About 10% of it's in the, in the leader or the startup founder. Most of it's in your network of clients, your network of contacts. That's where the information is. But most organizations, most people communicate by doing 90% talking and about 10% listening. So there's an imbalance there. And I think that the storytelling is really important. It's a really important skill. But also, just as important as storytelling is story listening. So I'm going to talk you through what I think is a really good way of getting somebody else's story out of them, because that's how you find out what they need. That's how you find out how you can help them, by getting their story out of them. Now, the reason why I put the picture of the firefighters up here is not because Ali said he likes firefighting, or Jessica said she likes fire starting. No, it's because what I'm going to tell you about is based on a study done by a guy called Gary Klein, who's an American psychologist, and he spent a long time interviewing people like firefighters and fighter pilots and Navy officers, so people who are in very, very high stakes environments, and he wanted to know how they made decisions. And so he looked at tough decisions in an environment where there is rapid change and where often there's no right answer. So there's no rule book to follow in these situations. And okay, not all of us have to deal with literally fighting fires, but we all have to deal with situations where we make tough decisions. We take the rapid change of the pandemic. We've all been dealing with rapid change over the last 14, 15 months, and we will be dealing with changes over the next 18 months. And in most businesses, there's no right answer. Yeah? People who tell you this is the right way to do it, well, okay, maybe they're right. Who knows? It's very difficult. So he was interested in how to talk to people who are taking these tough decisions in this kind of environment, and how to get the wisdom out of them. Because often if you just say to somebody, why did you do that? They don't really know, or they find it hard to explain. So if you were talking to, say you're talking to customers, or you're talking to people who might be involved with your company, and you say, why do you do this? Well, often people don't really know, or they give you a very simple answer, which is not really very accurate, because they don't really know. So the story is very interesting, because you can use the story to dig into what's happened. How did that feel? And you start to listen to people's story, and you get to know an awful lot about them. Then you can say, okay, well, I've got something for you. I think my business can help you with that. Okay, so how do you do it? So what Gary Klein suggested is, when you're talking to people, you're listening to their story, the first thing you do is you ask them about stuff that stands out. Sorry. So the first thing you're doing is you're looking for a story that stands out in their memory. And the tip here is if anything causes a strong emotional reaction, then there's a story there, and there's something interesting going on. Because strong emotion means basically we're trying to get somewhere, we've either got closer to our goal, in which case we feel positive, or something's knocked us back, in which case we feel negative. But either way, so his first point is, okay, don't go for boring stuff, go for stuff that stands out, that people remember. If you're looking for a story, go for a strong emotion. When was a time when was a time that felt really bad, or when was a time that felt really good? By the way, you can do this with your own story. Yes, talk to yourself, get your own story as a founder, as a startup. What's your story? So in the last 6 months, as you've been preparing your business, okay, what stands out? When has it felt really, really good? When has it felt really, really bad? Okay, next one. Make a simple timeline. What's happened? So, okay, the last 6 months while you've been building your business idea, what's happened? You know, beginning, middle, and end. So 6 months ago, I was doing this, then this, and then this, and then this. What were you trying to do? How's this situation evolved as you've gone? Interesting, what are the ups and downs? So you turn it from a kind of simple timeline into a bit more of a kind of a roller coaster of ups and downs. Okay. Then you go, okay, along that process, what were the key decisions? What were the options? What might have happened? What are the what ifs and the why nots? So the key moments where things could have gone differently, where you made key decisions or your customer made key decisions. All right, those are the important points on the story, those key decision moments where something could have gone one way or the other. Okay. Finally, you're looking for the kind of, if you like, the teachable moments. So what might you do differently next time? This is particularly useful if you're an expert. What might if you're an expert, you knew what to do in this situation, but what might a novice have missed? Okay, well, that's an interesting question. And then you ask, okay, well, who could learn from this story? Who should I tell this to? Who should I use this story to teach? So this is something that you can apply to yourself. You can kind of, in effect, listen to your own story and think, okay, what are the things here? And at the end of it, have I got something here I can use to teach somebody about why they should work with me? Or you can use this to listen to your customers, right? What's their problem? What am I going to try and help them with? Either way, it comes out in the form of a story. And I find this very useful approach when I'm working with clients to try and get them to improve their story. I do this with them. And by the end of it, we've always got a stronger story. Okay, any questions about that? About how to listen and how to ask questions that bring the story out, either of yourself or of other people? Okay, I shall move on. Okay, last part of this session is, well, why should startups tell stories? And the answer is because we all learn from setbacks. We don't learn, if everything just goes perfectly well, we don't kind of learn as much. So Ali's saying, for listening to other people, can we get an example? Okay, let me just wind back a slide, Ali. Thank you for asking the question. Okay. Let's say, so Ali's business idea is that he's going to help small and medium-sized companies to improve their cyber resilience. So what you really need, Ali, here is, let's think you get a chance to talk to somebody who runs a small business and has been attacked. Their business has suffered because of a cyber attack. So that's what you know about them. So they're running a medium-sized company, and last month they had a denial of service attack, or somebody took their website down, or somebody stole money from their bank account. Yeah, so they've been hacked in some way. They've been attacked. So okay, first of all, you go, right, let's work out, does this story stand out? Well, clearly it does, because I'm the customer. I lost a load of money. So yeah, of course it stands out. Negative emotion? You bet. Lots of negative emotion. So straight away, you know, that's the story to go for. That's the story to find out more about. Okay. Then in conversation with that person, you try and make a simple timeline. So, okay, what's happened? And the beginning Actually, the beginning is not the moment you find out you're hacked. The beginning is, well, what systems do you have in place? You know, what systems did you use when you set up the website? What systems do you have in place? What precautions did you take? Okay. What happened when you found out you got a call from the bank saying, "Are you sure you want to spend £20,000 in Monaco in a casino?" And you went, "No." Okay, so there's a bang. There's a in the middle. There's the crisis strikes. Okay, what did you do when you realised that things had gone wrong? So that's beginning, middle, and end. What are you trying to do at every stage? Well, at the beginning, I was trying to protect my business. In the middle, I was like just trying to stop it getting any worse. And after that, I'm trying to pick up the pieces. How did the situation evolve? Okay, ups and downs. Key decisions. So the key decision before the attack, what were the key decisions you made before the attack? What were the key decisions you made during the attack? What are the key decisions you've made since the attack? What could you have done? What if you'd done this? What if you'd done that? Why didn't you do this? So all of these are questions you're asking this business. Okay, what might you do differently next time? Well, they're going to have an opinion on that. You're wise now after the event. This has happened. What might a novice miss? So what would you say? Yeah, what would you say to people who've not experienced this? Who would you tell? Who could learn from this story? So all of these are drawing out information from somebody who's experienced a cyber attack. And what you're doing, Ali, all the time you're listening to this is, excuse me, you're thinking, right, what would I have done there? Okay, write that down. Okay, what would I have said then? What advice would I have given you there? Okay, what could you have done there? All the time you're thinking, how could I have helped you in the beginning, in the middle, at the end of this process? What could I have done to help you? And then you can go in and say, okay, listen, thank you for all that information. It's fantastic. Here's what I would suggest. Here's how I could help your business now. This place here now. That's how I can help your business. Now where you're at now is I'd do this, this, and this. But you can also say to this person you're listening to, okay, before this happened, here's what I would have told you to do. And that becomes part of what you offer to other businesses who haven't been attacked yet. So the story of here's a business who was attacked that you've listened to, you've drawn that story out. You use that as a teaching story to help you teach other businesses who haven't been hacked yet. Okay, here's what happens. Here's the mistakes people make. Before an attack, they make mistakes during attack, and they make mistakes after an attack. Okay, so you've got a story that you can use to teach other people. And of course, part of the lesson you're teaching them is you need someone like me to give you a hand. Does that make sense, Ali? Fab. It does. Very good. Thank you. Okay. So we do learn from setbacks. We learn from mistakes. And this is, in a way, this is one of the most useful stories I think you can tell as a startup, or in life generally as a business, is stories of setbacks. In particular, setbacks that you recover from. And so what I'm going to actually go back into talking about story arcs. I talked about story arcs yesterday. Those of you who, Ben, you weren't on the call yesterday, but for the others, I did. If you remember, we talked about story arcs, and I shared with you a story arc for a pitch. And this is a story arc that will help you to pitch an idea to somebody. And it's like a roller coaster, because it goes, right now you've got a problem. That's negative. But there's also right now an opportunity, and that's positive. We're going to have to take some practical steps that will be difficult. That's a negative. But if we get it right, if we get it right, I can promise you that, okay, that's a positive. So this model of a story arc is like an up and down roller coaster. And it helps you create a pitch. It helps you tell a story of what you've done. Okay. There's another story arc I want to share with you, which is, for me, is probably the most useful, I think, the most useful story arc for anyone in any kind of business, or to be honest, for anyone in any kind of situation where you learn something, where you get older and wiser, and that's how you build up trust in you as a character. Is I've got experience, I've been through things, I'm wiser. Okay, so the other story arc is this shape. This is a recovery story, and actually this is the story that we've all been through in the pandemic. To a greater or lesser extent, we've all been through a recovery arc. So I'm going to talk you through it. There's a famous novelist, an American guy called Kurt Vonnegut, who talked a lot about story arcs, and he said this story arc is the story of a man in a hole. It's because, right, you start along, you're walking along, minding your own business, right, and then you fall in a hole because you weren't really paying attention. You fall down into a hole, or maybe somebody pushes you into a hole. Okay, you can't fall out of a hole. You have to climb. So you climb out of the hole to a better place. And the better place is, well, you won't be that stupid again. You won't fall in that hole again. So you're actually better off. So the beats of this story, the beats are this. You start off in your comfort zone, where most of us are in our comfort zone most of the time. You start off in your comfort zone, you're minding your own business, you're doing your thing. There's a trigger, something happens, you fall, you trip, you stumble, you get pushed, but you fall, you go down, something happens. That's a crisis. Yep, the fall is a crisis. It's a bad place to be. But down there, you work out how to recover. And what's interesting about this story arc is you don't recover back to your comfort zone. You don't go back to the old way of doing things. You go back to, you recover to a new way of doing things, and that new way is a better place. Because if nothing else, you won't fall in that hole again. You won't let that knock you down again. So let me give you an example from my experience of the pandemic. So rewind to March 2020, and no, February 2020, and I was preparing to travel to Europe, and I was expecting to be working for 10 days in Europe, face-to-face, working with clients. I was going to speak at a conference, and then I was going to do some training days. I had about 10 days work lined up in Eastern Europe, and I had my flights booked, hotels booked, the whole thing. And that's how my business was operating. It was operating entirely based on me traveling places and working with people face to face. And I quite liked it. I was quite happy. I quite like traveling. I like meeting people. So, all good. I didn't have any kind of digital learning service at all. That's part of my, I didn't really want to. I didn't like the idea of doing stuff on a screen. So, okay. Now, you know what the trigger is. March 2020, pandemic has struck. Lockdowns are starting all over the world. And by middle of March 2020, not only had my trip to Europe been cancelled, but all my work for that year had just been cancelled. So in March 2020, the pandemic has triggered a crisis, and I have zero work on my order book. All my clients have cancelled because all my work was face-to-face. None of it was going to happen. So I had to move. I had to switch into doing stuff like this, doing stuff by remote. And one thing I realized, so I watched other people doing, online seminars and webinars and that kind of thing. And I realized that a lot of people do them very badly. And I realized that, well, I've worked in television for 20 years. I know how to use, this space, this square space of screen. And I know how to use it. I know how to communicate over a screen. So I could do what I think were better webinars than many other people. And what I also discovered is I could charge my time by the hour rather than by the day. So rather than turning up somewhere and working with people for a whole day, I could just Zoom them and work with them for 90 minutes like I am with you guys. And it was actually much, much easier to do work with clients all over the world. So I started working with people in Switzerland, Ireland, Hong Kong, Japan, California. In fact, as long as the time zone was okay, I could work anywhere. And I wasn't flying anywhere. I was obviously burning up Zoom time, but I wasn't flying anywhere. My carbon footprint, my expenses went excuse me, went right down. So by the end of the year, I'd actually increased my turnover of my business by about 20%, gone from zero to more than the previous year. So that's okay. That's a recovery story. I started in my comfort zone. I went into a crisis, but I ended up in a better place. And what's interesting about this story is it also feels like going from light into dark and then back out into the light again. And that's, I don't know if you know the story of the Hobbit, you know, the Lord of the Rings character, the Hobbit. Bilbo is the character, and he goes off on an adventure. And he starts the adventure. Before the adventure, he lives in a quiet place. He lives in the Shire. It's very much in his comfort zone. Nothing exciting ever happens. This is the kind of once upon a time of a story. And then he's invited on this adventure, and it gets very, very dark very quickly. And at one point, he's lost in a cave. He's being chased by monsters and goblins. But that's where he finds a golden ring down there in the dark. He finds some treasure, and he uses it to escape and to finish the adventure. And yeah, okay. If you think about this, if that golden ring had been lying on the side of the road outside his front door, back in the comfort zone, somebody else would have found it already. He would have found it already. There would be no adventure. There'd be no story. There'd be no discovery. So you don't find treasure in your comfort zone. You find treasure in the dark, and you drag it out of the dark and back into the light and do something useful with it. So that for me is very, very reassuring. When things go wrong, is when the pandemic strikes, that we discover something that we didn't know. We get new information. We discover something about ourselves. We discover something about people. We discover whatever it is. We find something new, and that something new, if we can use it, that's our treasure. So here's a story for you all to think about from the last. Okay, think about your pandemic experience. Yes, think about your last 14 months, the pandemic. So whether you've been in education or been in work or been out of work or whatever it is. Okay, pre-pandemic, January 2020, 15 months ago, you were in your comfort zone. We all were. Okay, nothing wrong with being in your comfort zone. It's a nice place to be. Everything's okay. Not brilliant, but it's okay. So you're doing okay, right? But something's wrong. Something's missing. Your comfort zone isn't by any means perfect. In fact, something's wrong, or some potential is going to waste. So in my case, something wrong. I was flying I was flying 30 times a year. My carbon footprint was crazy. I was exhausted, actually. So that was something that was wrong in my comfort zone. Also, I had potential to reach many, many more people through digital platforms than I was already doing. I had much more potential, and I was wasting it. Then comes the trigger. Then comes the crisis. So, okay, down in the worst point of the pandemic for you, what new information did you learn during the pandemic? What did you learn about yourself? What did you learn about life? What did you learn about society? What did you learn about other people? What did you learn about, what did you learn? What's the new information you found in the crisis? How did that new information help you recover? Now, maybe you're still there in the crisis. Okay, maybe you haven't recovered yet. I feel like I've kind of recovered. I'm in a better place. And I can say, well, the place I'm at now with my business is better than where I was 12 months ago, 18 months ago. Definitely better, because I'm reaching more people, I'm traveling less. Okay. You may be not yet there. You may be, as far as you're concerned, the pandemic might still be down in the crisis. But you'll find something. Even if you've not found it yet, you will find something. And you think, okay, people's behavior is changing. Consumers' behavior is changing. Society is changing. Education is changing. Stuff is changing because of this crisis. Somewhere here, there's an opportunity for me to do something. That's why you're thinking of starting your own business. So what's the opportunity? What do I do? Excuse me. What's the opportunity? What do I do? How do I use this to recover? So that's your pandemic story. So guys, if you'd like to reflect on this, maybe you've got a version of this story that you could share with us now. Maybe you've got some questions about this version of the story. But there is a story you can tell about the last 18 months that is a recovery story. And I think it's going to be a really powerful one. And I think, for the next few years, actually, I think if you ever go for a job interview, right, people are going to ask, what did you learn from the pandemic? What did you do in the pandemic? What changed for you in the pandemic? So there's real scope here, I think, for you to find something, find some treasure in the dark, and have that as your story. So what do you think? Any questions, any thoughts, any observations? I won't keep you any longer because it's Friday afternoon and we're nearly all done. So any other thoughts or questions you'd like to ask about this model of story, the story you can tell about yourself and your recovery?
But I think if we're going to tell a story, it should be related to what you intend to tell your customers. Okay.
Yeah.
Because definitely we will have personal stories, and we won't want to tell our personal stories to our consumers because it brings no advantage. But then if we're going to tell our customers stories, it should be that kind of stories that will also further our interest.
Yes, I agree. So that's why I told the story version of this that I told you was about my business. My professionally, I was in a comfort zone. Then I was in a crisis. Now I'm in a better place in a professional sense. So rather than talking about my personal life, which you're right, you don't want to hear about my personal life, to be honest. I'm sure you don't. So that's why I focused this about my business story. And that's what I would suggest you do the same, John, is think, okay, when have I, in my professional life, when have I experienced a crisis where I was in my comfort zone, thought I knew what I was doing, something went wrong, and there's where I learned something new. And now, okay, equally, this could be, we were playing with a story from Ali's world about cyber attacks on businesses. Well, Ali, this is the story of a business that recovers from a cyber attack. Yeah? So the business is in its comfort zone, thinking they're okay, right? The crisis is they get hit by some cyber attack. In that moment, they discover something new about the world, but also they discover how to protect themselves from the next attack. And the answer is, the protection is almost always people. Yeah, train your people better, make your people more aware. So they come out of the crisis, assuming they survive it, it doesn't wipe them out. Then they come out of the crisis to something better than there was before. So this is a story of business. So businesses can go through this story arc. Professional people can go through this story arc. You personally can obviously go through a story transformation like this. I get the sense that some audiences like the personal story. So Americans seem to like telling personal stories about their own personal journey when they're talking about work. It's up to you. So John, if you think this audience doesn't want to hear my private life, okay, that's fine. Don't tell it. But if you can tell a story like this about your professional life, that helps us understand why we should work with you. We should work with you because you're someone who gets it, not because you're someone who gets it right every time, but because you're someone who learns from when things go wrong. Eunice Point says, I think people should resonate with your personal story. Well, to be honest, they often do. This is why you do see, think of your typical TED talk with a business person doing a TED talk. There's almost always something personal in there about their personal life, their personal experience. And yeah, we do. We find that it resonates with us. And the clever thing to do is to give away a bit, but not too much.
Yeah.
But also to work out what does this audience need. Okay, do we have any more questions? Or any more observations? Anyone want to say anything else? Okay, Jessica, do you want to send, is there a feedback form you need people to fill in for the session?
Oh, yes, thank you for reminding me. Yes, there is. Let me get it. Thank you, Steve. That was another great session. What a great session to end the festival as well. So thank you so much. You've had some really great sessions, and obviously the recording will be available for everyone at the end as well, along with the materials that you've sent out to us. So here is the feedback link. Right here, if everyone could complete that, we would really appreciate it. And we are also starting our Launch Global program next week. So for international students / recent graduates, we are doing a program similar to Launch, where it is just open for international students or graduates. That is the link, and I'll give you the link to register for all the events as well.
Okay, so listen, I shall at that point say thank you all. Thank you particularly Ali and John for sharing your ideas, your story with me as well. It's very good of you to do that. Thanks to everyone else for taking part and joining in. If you want to connect with me on LinkedIn, so just search Steve Rawling, and I think that's the first Google search that comes up. It's been great talking to you all, and hope you find it useful. Thanks, everybody. I'll say goodbye.
Thank you very much, Steve. Bye.
Bye-bye.
Thank you so much, Steve. And thank you, everybody, for attending.
Thank you. Thank you.
Bye-bye.